Hello and welcome to the presentation. This is one of a series of presentations on Microsoft licensing. Additional presentations in this licensing series can be found at www.learnlicensing.com. Today we'll be talking about the licensing and purchasing of SQL Server 2008. We have two main focuses for our session today: what SQL edition fits your solution and how to license the solution. Let's start with what. We will review the different editions of SQL and how to choose which one is right for your organization's need, and then look at the licensing of internal and external users, physical and virtual environments, and failover situations. Let's start with a quick overview of the three key areas of how SQL 2008 delivers on Microsoft's data platform vision. Trusted. SQL Server 2008 provides the highest levels of security, reliability, and scalability for your business-critical applications. Productive. To take advantage of new opportunities in today's fast-moving business world, companies need the ability to create and deploy data-driven solutions quickly, and SQL Server 2008 reduces time and cost of management and deployment of applications. Intelligent. SQL Server 2008 provides a comprehensive platform delivering business intelligence where your users want it. These three areas are important to most organizations, but perhaps to different degrees, and thus Microsoft offers a range of products and you can choose the one tailored to your business needs. There are 6 editions of SQL Server 2008 in 2 categories: core and specialized. The specialized editions are just that, specialized for particular functions. There's Workgroup Edition to run branch locations, Web Edition to run large-scale, highly available web applications, Compact Edition to build applications for mobile devices, and Express Edition for building desktop and small server applications. The Core Editions, Standard and Enterprise Editions, are likely to be those that a business will choose for their core data platform needs. For details on which editions would work best for your business needs, see the accompanying handout for a link to tables detailing the different features of the core editions at www.learnlicensing.com. As an overview, you should consider the following areas when you're choosing between editions. A particularly strong requirement in any one of these areas will indicate a need for adopting an enterprise edition. Performance, including your scalability and high availability requirements for your data platform. Functionality, including data warehouse and business intelligence, with more sophisticated and complete functionality available in Enterprise Edition. Security and management, including your requirements for data encryption and degree of virtualization in your organization. Enterprise Edition offers greater depth and support of these features. Let's now look at licensing models for SQL Server 2008. Using a typical example of a network with a requirement for SQL servers, let's say there are 3 servers running SQL in a network. Each server has 4 processors used by a SQL server. In this network, there will be users who use the data on the SQL server, and there will be machines connected to the SQL servers, accessing the server from both inside the organization as well as through the internet outside of the organization. The first SQL licensing option is a model called Server Cal licensing. In this mode, you purchase and assign each server one SQL Server license. Then you need to purchase client access licenses, or CALs, for either the machines or the users that connect to or use the SQL data. If you purchase CALs for all the devices, then any number of users can access those machines to connect to the SQL data. This is known as licensing CALs per device. You should note that a CAL is purely a license. It is not a piece of technology connecting devices to the server, simply the license allowing the device to utilize the services of the server. If you purchase CALs for all the users, then a user can use any number of machines to connect to and use the SQL data. This is known as licensing CALs per device. For both types of CALs, the users and devices are licensed to access any server running SQL Server on the network. In the case here, one or all 3 of the SQL servers. The SQL CALs can be used to access any SQL server regardless of platform, 32-bit, 64-bit, or IA64. Note that you could purchase a combination of user and device CALs. In this model, external users are licensed in a similar way, by purchasing user CALs allocated to each external user. One other situation to take into account at this point is something called multiplexing, when a user or device accesses the SQL Server indirectly through another server. When multiplexing, a CAL is still required. However, if you have a user who is simply forwarding on the results of a query, there is no SQL Server licensing requirements for the recipient of that information. Recapping, Using the server cal model, you assign one license per each physical server and device or user cals for each user or device accessing the server. Let's now look at an alternative SQL licensing model. Using the same network scenario of 3 SQL servers, each with 4 processors and a variety of internal or external users and machines needing access and use of the SQL data both directly and indirectly, this licensing option for SQL Server is the per processor model. You buy a SQL Server license for each processor used by the SQL Server in the physical servers. In this case, 12 per processor licenses. These server licenses entitle all internal and external devices and users to connect to the SQL servers. In other words, there is no requirement for cals. There are also no additional licensing requirements if you have multi-core processors or are making use of hyperthreading. It's still just one license per processor. Very often, the decision as to which way is the best way to license your SQL servers is a financial one. The larger number of users or devices connecting to the SQL servers, the more attractive per processor licensing becomes. If you decide to split components such as analysis services and reporting services across different machines, the different machines would then need SQL licenses assigned to each server. The other licensing requirement to take into account is Windows Server. Windows Server is required for SQL Server to run and must be fully licensed. You would license Windows Server in the server cal mode in the same way we talked about for SQL Server, and then choose how to license SQL Server on top of the Windows Server, either in server cal or per processor modes. Let's now extend this and see how you would purchase licenses for running SQL in virtual environments. Let's look at an example machine. Imagine it is one physical server with 4 processors. On top of each of the 4 processors, we're running 4 individual operating system environments which are using 2 virtual processors each. SQL is running in each of the virtual environments. Let's look at what licenses are needed when you deploy either standard or enterprise editions in either the server cal or the per processor mode. Let's start with licensing SQL Server Standard Edition in server cal mode. With the physical machines, a license is required for each physical server when licensing Standard Edition in server cal mode. It's very similar with virtual machines. You need a SQL Server Standard Edition license for each virtual machine that SQL is running on. In this case, 4 virtual operating system environments requiring 4 Standard Edition licenses. In this virtualized environment, you are licensed for running as many instances of SQL in those virtual machines as you want or need, all of them with the same single license for that virtual machine. And don't forget, there is the same requirement for cals as in the physical environments. Next, let's look at the Enterprise Edition using the server cal model. With the same server as in the last example, there are huge benefits to using Enterprise Edition. You just need one Enterprise Edition license for the physical server, and that gives you the right to run as many virtual machines with as many instances of SQL Server as you want or need. If you use or are planning to use virtualization in your business, this could be another reason to choose Enterprise Edition over Standard Edition. Okay, now let's pay our attention to per processor licensing in this virtual environment. With the physical machines, you need to purchase a license for each physical processor when licensing Standard Edition in the per processor mode. And it's very similar with virtual machines. You need a SQL Server Standard Edition license for each virtual processor that SQL is using. So in this example, 8 Standard Edition per processor licenses. Again, you are licensed for running as many instances of SQL in those virtual machines as you want or need to. As with the physical servers, with per processor licensing in the virtual environment, there is no need for cals. Let's see how the example changes when deploying Enterprise Edition. Enterprise Edition licensing in a per processor virtual environment requires an Enterprise Edition license for the physical processors in your server, regardless of how many virtual processors are being used. So in this case, just 4 Enterprise per processor licenses are required. Let's turn now to our final licensing consideration for SQL Server, failover licensing. In a physical environment, the SQL Server license includes the rights to deploy a passive server which is the mirror of your active production server that users and devices are connected to and using data from. There is just a requirement for the license to be assigned to an active server, and should that fail, the license is considered to cover the passive server for up to 30 days, essentially a time period to allow you to get the original server up and running. In a virtual environment, running instances of SQL may be moved whenever required between licensed servers. Note that there is no licensing requirements for storing non-running instances of SQL Server. Let's move to our next section and look at purchasing strategies for SQL licenses and the benefits of adding software assurance. There are 3 ways of purchasing the SQL Server 2008 licenses for your organization. You can purchase a retail boxed copy of the product known as full package product. This is generally the most expensive way to acquire software, but gives you immediate access to the software. The server licenses for Standard and Enterprise Edition each include CALs, 5 for the Standard Edition and 25 for the Enterprise Edition. Microsoft supports retail software. If you need to purchase new hardware at the same time, you could choose to purchase your software pre-installed through the OEM channel. This is generally a very cost-effective way of purchasing software, but be aware that the software lives and dies on the machine it was purchased with and cannot be moved to another machine. The OEM supplier supports the software and hardware. Volume licensing is the most flexible purchase model and provides the most comprehensive use rights. If you have an existing volume licensing agreement, you can simply add your SQL Server license purchases to it. Or you can start a new agreement with as little as 1 server and 4 CALs, or 1 per processor license. As well as offering savings over retail pricing, licenses purchased through a volume licensing program include imaging and downgrade rights, among others. Let's now look at why you would add software assurance. Software assurance is only available through volume licensing. Software assurance is a comprehensive maintenance offering that helps you get the most out of your software investment. In addition to the flexibility you get from volume licensing use rights, software assurance can add a lot of value throughout your use life cycle to help you deploy, manage, and migrate software. Software assurance for servers includes 24/7 problem resolution support, a TechNet Plus direct subscription, unlimited web support, e-learning courses and labs, and new version rights. There are qualifying rules for software assurance benefits. For more information on software assurance, ask your reseller or view the software assurance broadcast in this series. You can choose software assurance at the time of purchase and begin using your benefits immediately for use during your license agreement. You can find additional licensing presentations covering licensing principles and in-depth product licensing models at this site, as well as an accompanying downloadable quick reference card outlining the major principles of this presentation and a resource list to get more information related to this topic at www.learnlicensing.com. Thanks for joining this presentation on licensing of SQL Server 2008.